Welcome to the March 10th edition of the PFF Forecast. We have a great show, a fantastic show. Chris Sims joins us, super generous with his time. We go through all of the quarterbacks, his top six. We even have a bonus, a seventh quarterback, his sleeper of the draft, which is awesome. It's a lot of fun. So let's rock. All right, we're going to get to Chris Sims here in a second. I want to do a speed round of like the most important things that we've heard about over the past couple of days. Okay? Are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay. Dak Prescott.
Good for Dak.
Good for Dak.
There's not much else Dallas could have done.
I have kind of I'm going to be impressed if the Dallas Cowboys get double-digit wins each season for the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, but that has more to do with drastic mismanagement along the roster than it does.
Has nothing to do with Dak.
Yeah.
It is all about, I think it's Dak won in this situation.
Yeah.
Obviously. And we saw that coming when he got tagged. I just think that this kind of shines a light.
This is a lost bet for Jerry Jones, and he has to pay up. But Here's the thing. I will say this. This is what makes it less egregious, okay? That division is utter horseshit.
They're terrible.
So if you are thinking, and it's a shorter deal, which I think some people think benefits Dak, but of course, like if you're Dallas, this is the bet you're making. Dak, CeeDee Lamb on a rookie deal, Michael Gallup on the end of a rookie deal. Dak, we all talk about how bad Dallas's O-line was last year. They performed better like when Prescott was in there. And then the other thing is everybody's looking at that defense, but Dallas didn't have to give up any draft picks for this whole thing. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to they get some positive variance on defense and they'll be fine. They'll win the NFC East and they'll be relevant, which and the NFC is kind of flat. So I don't see it as that bad of a deal. That being said, post hoc, we're all going to be like, did they pay too much for him when they end up not having enough support for him later on?
Yeah, I don't think so. I have my thing is that I do wonder how confident we can be that Dak has top 5 play, for an entire season in him.
But he's done that. He did that for 20 or more games, right? Like
he did?
2019, he was the 3rd highest WAR quarterback in football. And then last season, he was carrying that team for like the first, when did he get hurt? Week 5, week 6? I mean, you're talking about, right? Because we were writing the articles after 2018. They were calling him the Dak up quarterback. And we wrote like, he's not worth the long-term deal. And then 2019, he played extremely well. That team led the league in yards per play on offense. Mm-hmm. And they were bad variants, right? Like the Dallas Cowboys have mostly gotten great elite caliber quarterback play from Dak over the last year plus and have gotten shit variants.
I think elite is strong. PFF grade was 11th in 2019. It was 9th last season. Years before it was 19th, 18th, and then 8th his rookie year. So I don't know. I do think I still think there's a little bit left there. I am a believer in Dak. So I think that he can. I thought he made a nice improvement last year. I think he can continue that. But I don't think it's like a lock by any stretch.
No, but his grade has monotonically increased every year since 2017. The sacks, sacks were a big issue.
I don't want to spoil it for people, but that's your second monotonicity reference.
He took more sacks in 2018 than he took in 2019 and his abbreviated 2020 combined, like almost twice as many. So there have been aspects of his game that shouted for improvement, that he's improved. The real question is, what could they have gotten for him? And I think, as much as I'm very much about, if he can elevate the play of rookie contract players around him, it's worth it, especially in a situation where if you open him up to a trade, tag and trade, let's say, he's probably the third most preferred quarterback on the trade market behind Wilson and behind Watson. So Dallas really got stuck here. And I think they made the best of a bad situation on their end financially. They should have paid him. They should have paid him this time last year, right? I mean, like,
but good for Dak.
Good for Dak.
Great for Dak because he.
He seems like a great. He seems like just like they just had his press conference and he said a lot of great. He seems like just a good person to have as the face of your franchise.
Yes. Yeah. No, we're in agreement there. The only other news is that we're going to pour one out for Allen Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to feel bad for NFL players, but I kind of feel bad for Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I mean,
dude.
Hopefully they get a good quarterback. But look, he chose Chicago over Green Bay. I mean, and he overperformed. And unfortunately, the NFL is a league where if you drastically overperform your contract, the team can hold on to you for dear life. We saw it. And the interesting thing is going to be, does he, because Kirk Cousins benefited financially from it immensely. We just saw Dak Prescott. Even somebody like Tremaine Johnson. Remember the Rams put the tag on Tremaine Johnson twice? Yep. And he got that big deal from the Jets. Deal. And Tremaine Johnson didn't even play all that well in the 2 tag years.
Yep.
But there's always a team that was dumbass like the Jets. They'll sign him to a big deal. So I think it'll end up okay for Robinson because,
he's going to be all right.
But it's going to be frustrating for him, getting 55% of his passes being catchable.
Just for us, we want to watch good football players play well. So it's always, it sucks to see him languish there. I think those are really the big pieces. We'll talk more on the Sunday pod about some of the bigger takeaways and going into free agency.
Yeah. There'll be more buzz by then, I think.
I think so. And by the way, if you're curious about free agency, I would go check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast. Trent Williams and Richard Sherman were fantastic.
By the way, somebody in the comment section on Twitter, by the way, said, you're starting to become too big for this podcast, I hear. They were telling you to stop slumming it with me on Wednesdays and Sundays, and you were very gracious in response to it. But I got to say, we're rubbing shoulders with a former player today, but you're talking not only to two players current on your favorite team.
Hall of Famers.
Yeah, well, Richard Sherman's a Hall of Famer. Trent Williams probably a Hall of Famer. You're right. So two, yeah.
I'll be very honest with you. So first off, that person, very kind of them to say this. I barely make it to this podcast. Okay, so let's be very real. I was subbing in for Chris because there was a schedule conflict, and I was not gonna lie. I'm not usually nervous on those types of things anymore. But I was a little nervous.
You have gotten, when we first used to do stuff, you always got more nervous than me. And maybe that's just, but then you end up performing better at times than me. So it's probably worth being more nervous. But yeah, you've gotten a lot more relaxed. But you were talking to two Hall of Fame players on your favorite team.
So you should go listen to the podcast if you have not, because they opened up about some really cool stuff. And I got to say, the stuff that I found most fascinating was all of the random tidbits and player comparisons that they have. And the way they think about other players and some of the stories about training with Adrian Peterson and other stuff, who they think the most athletic guys are. It was really fascinating. So I would go check that out.
Do you think so just to obviously end this conversation, do you think that every player is like that? Because I feel like I think 10% of the players are as thoughtful as Richard Sherman is, right? Where they're legitimately the student of the game to a point where they almost put any analyst to shame. But because I feel that's because Richard, that's what it takes to be a guy at Stanford where Jim Harbaugh
right.
didn't even puff him up. He ran a 4.5, 4.6, and he's gonna end up being the best cornerback of his generation. That sort of mindset that you need to have, I feel is necessary. And I wonder
what percentage
of players are that thoughtful?
No, I don't think it's many. I will say this though. I think it's a lot higher of a percentage than people in the public assume.
Yeah.
And that is what has stuck out to me. First off, in hearing Richard talk every single week, no joke, the guy takes in the notes that we send him, reads through them. He did this before the Trent Williams conversation. So I sent him some notes, some questions. He reads through them. He digests them. He basically memorized them, didn't look at them once during the podcast, and did a a phenomenal job of creating that conversation, which is harder to do than people will give it credit for, especially for a guy whose mind is on performing on the football field 24/7. So I think it's certainly not a high percentage because Richard Sherman, Trent Williams was really
and
with it.
Offensive linemen are the smartest people on the field, I feel like, on average.
Listening to Trent Williams talk about the game of football was my mind was blown. But it's definitely what I've taken away from that podcast is there's a greater number of football players who, when you listen to them talk and you actually have a conversation with them, you're like, holy shit, like,
this is their profession.
This person is a genius, with respect to the game of football, and we do not give them enough credit for it. That's not a pitch for going to listen to that podcast. I don't know what is. You should definitely stick with us and listen to this podcast, though, with Chris Sims. Great conversation. Here we go with the man himself. All right, we are joined by, long time coming, friend of the podcast, Chris Sims, PFT Live, the Unbuttoned Podcast, NBC Sports. You can find him all over. Chris, they're working you hard over there, man. You're on Notre Dame. You're on Football Night in America. Fred Godelli, Rob Hyland. Those guys are working you to the bone, man. I'm just glad you could fit us in.
I mean, they are. I'm not going to lie. You're right. They did take Notre Dame off my plate this past year, which was nice. I mean, again, it's a great honor to go to Notre Dame and be a part of that. But I think, as you guys know, like, my life is all NFL. So I would be like, that would be the biggest stress in my life. I would be, Sunday through Thursday, NFL, and I'd get on a plane Thursday night and I'd be like, oh crap, wait, who's Notre Dame playing? Let me start watching film, and I'd have to, dig deep and start really studying to catch up and get up to speed with college football. So I'm happy I'm all NFL and just the draft and free agency and all that stuff. But thanks for having me, guys.
That reminded me of the time when George and I, early on in our time here, would have to give out a gambling pick of the week for college football. and George didn't know. I mean, he knew 3 players.
I knew 3 quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks that were going to get drafted, and that was how you got me to watch a college football game. Ian Book was not cutting it for me.
So I feel your pain. I mean, college is really it's a tough one because not only that, the rosters are big and like the injury information isn't standardized. Like it's harder.
The play,
actually,
it's not too dissimilar from college basketball, where the play is just overall not that great.
Yeah.
I agree. You agreed. I'm with you. You're right. It's more players to figure out. You want to balance not being too harsh on the players because they're kids. College kids and all of that. Right. And I'm like you, George. I mean, I'm not a like sit down on Saturday afternoon and watch college football all day. I do NFL all week. I got a 14-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old boy. I got, a wife. I'm not going to be like, hey, see you guys. I'm not going to talk to you on this one day. I'm home here and screw off. I got to watch college football. I'm a casual college watcher.
Yeah, Eric has 2 children, and they don't see him on Saturday.
I feel seen.
Well, no, they see him. He does not see them.
Right. That's the typical dad move. Way to go, Eric.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm getting roasted right now.
It's okay. Your sharpness on college football is appreciated by me. I do appreciate you grind through it. We are going to talk about some former, soon-to-be pro, but former college quarterbacks. Because, Chris, you hit me up like a month ago, and you're like, hey, I'm about to dig in. I'm going in on the draft. Made sure your PFF Ultimate account was ready to rock.
Right.
And I said, hey, man, as soon as you get these guys in order, let's talk. Because here's the funny thing is, so Eric and I try to approach this, using numbers and math to inform our decisions. And oftentimes it gets us roasted, for lack of a better term, on social media. But even within PFF, like, people be like, you guys are fucking nuts, So like, we really appreciate the unique perspective and like sticking to, hey, this is the process that I believe in, and I'm going to tell you my results, and we're going to talk about them. So could you start by taking us through your process for how you got your quarterback rankings?
Right. All right. So, I mean, the first thing is, to play off a little what you said there. I mean, you're ranking players and doing that all the time. You're not going to be right all the time. So I'm not like going into it going, oh my gosh, I hope I get all of these right and pass the test. Like, I realize I might be wrong here or there, but I just, again, have the confidence in the fact that I've been around it my whole life. I did grow up around Phil Simms, who was being taught by, Bill Parcells and company. I've gotten the opportunity to catch footballs from Dan Marino and Tom Brady and Brett Favre and those kind of guys as I was growing up. And of course I played and I've been around it. So I am confident, at least from that standpoint, to go, wait, I've been around it. I see what it takes to be a starting quarterback and the qualities that are, positives and negatives and all of that. I have a decent history of being right about some of the diamonds in the rough as far as being unpopular picks and all of that. But I think when I get down to the process, and I've gotten some wrong too. I don't sit here to try to sit on my high horse. So one of my things on my podcast is self-scouting myself, to where I go, wait, what did I get wrong? Where was I wrong? And let's dive into that. When it comes to the quarterback stuff, George, the first thing I do, I really just want to see talent, raw talent. That's where I start. I almost will watch the POAs or a highlight tape of just the positive things to go, okay, wait, all right, this kid is capable of this. Mm-hmm. All right, now let's start to dive in and really dissect, the motion. How consistent of a thrower is he when he's throwing a 15-yard in cut or a 15-yard out route and it's there to be had and it's open? How many times does he hit the bullseye and throw it in there the proper way? Okay, that's good. There we go. Okay, now let's go to tight windows and things like that. Ooh, tight windows. All right. Oh, this guy he fits it in tight windows too. I like that. Then I get into the aspect of and that, I would clarify all that as taking advantage of all that's there to be had, right? Mm-hmm. And then I go into a process a little bit of, okay, let's make sure we're realistic. I know we're going to look at wins and stats and things like that. But in these poorer games, was it realistic for me to think that this guy could do more? Mm-hmm. I always go back to Patrick Mahomes in that draft in 2017. I came out and that was oh, he's the guy. He's the guy. And everybody kept coming to me and going, well, what about the TCU game? Mm-hmm. And I would go, well, yeah, what about it? I watched the game. I mean, you could put Superman or John Elway in there. Nothing's going to change. There was nobody open. He was under pressure. It was a tough day. Their team won. It's a team sport. So on those negatives, I do ask myself realistically, wait, was it realistic for this person to succeed and do that? Okay, no. Or yes, whatever that is there. Oh, man, there was people open. He had a bad day, and there was people open all over the place. And, man, that concerns me. And then the last part, and sorry for the long answer, is just a little bit of, I also am big into what happens when there's nothing there to be had. Oh, the pass protection's not good. Oh, there's really not anybody open and things like that. Because for more times than not, unless you're on a really good team in the NFL, you're going to have a lot of plays like that in the NFL. And that's to me where the Rodgers and the Mahomes and the Josh Allen separate themselves. Oh, protection's not good. Everybody's covered. Ooh, they dodge a guy, and zoom, there goes a 30-yard rifle down the field. And you go, whoa, that was a shit play. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yes,
good. But good, thank you. So you go, oh, there's a shit play, but they got 30 yards out of it because the quarterback's special. Yeah. So I try to take all that into account and some other things along the way that I'm probably forgetting, but hopefully that answered the question.
Well, and I think that's a good way to think because obviously football is so rife with observation bias, right?
Yeah.
And Zach Wilson, obviously is somebody who, while his, I think, schedule wasn't very good, he did have a lot of opportunities to do what you described, which is to throw off a bad platform and to make plays when the play broke down. He also didn't have, let's be frank, a great supporting cast. And I also think that's where, when you look at your rankings and you have Kellen Mond fourth, I believe, which honestly, I was looking at our raw mathematical projections, and we have Mond ahead of Lance too, for a lot of similar reasons, in the sense that playing in the SEC every week, especially in 2020, when none of these players really got a chance to pad their stats against non-conference teams, right? When they're playing a shortened schedule,
right?
You're getting in a situation where a lot of times the players you're playing with are overmatched on a regular basis. And so the question for Mond and I don't watch the film nearly as much as you guys do, but as far as did the play break down, the answer is going to be yes more for Kellen Mond, because his entire team, even though that team was pretty good, is overmatched in the SEC way more than Trey Lance's in obviously at NDSU,
No doubt.
but even at a certain extent, Trevor Lawrence in the ACC, which people give the ACC a bump, but that conference is actually
They
pretty
give it a
weak
ton
now.
of credit.
It stinks, right? Exactly right, Eric. It stinks other than 2 teams. You're right.
And so when we look at that stuff, again, you put it in the context. Same thing's true about Mac Jones, although the difference with Mac Jones is the players he's playing with are far better. Now, he had worse receivers than Tua did, right? Tua had 4 guys, including the 2 guys that Mac had for half the year and the 1 guy that Mac had the whole year. But at the same time, you're facing great competition. So, I don't mind this as much. I think we're a little bit higher on Fields, but again, there's some things about Fields that are troubling. The fact is he takes longer to throw against the blitz than against not the blitz. That's a huge red flag for me and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think you can defend a lot of these. I think it's, to your point, like this is going to shake out. We look at the way things drafted this year. You had Burrow, Tua, Herbert. Herbert's probably the favorite to be the best of those 3 guys, and so every single year the rankings don't end up being.
Look at the year 2 years before with the Baker, Lamar. That's
like one of those graphs that have changed every year. Exactly. So anybody that has a ranking that ends up being different than consensus, generally speaking, is probably adding a good data set to our observation because the world is noisier than we like to think it is.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I mean, you said a lot of good things there, Eric. I mean, I look at, a lot of what you said the same way, and to dive into that. Like I took a lot of shit last year. I had Herbert over Tua. I kept saying it's not even close, and Herbert is that guy we're talking about where you go, man, the offense stinks. There's not a lot of open people. The numbers aren't going to always look good. But even the incompletions to me look good, where I went, okay, it was uncovered. He put the ball in a spot where maybe his guy could get it, or no one got it. And, sometimes, and I'm not trying to knock anything, but sometimes the numbers can look at that as a negative. And I go, no, he kind of threw that ball exactly where he wanted to. This was the only chance he had to get a completion and do that. And that's what I want to make clear, too. Because this is what people try to go, you're a shock jock, or you're just trying to do this to get, notoriety. Absolutely not. First off, I don't give a damn about social media. I love what I do. I like being right more than anything. I go into the process with zero bias. That's the first thing people got to do when you evaluate quarterbacks. You can't go into the process going, oh, I really want to like this guy, and I don't want to like this guy. Well, if you go into it that way, you're going to find reasons not to or like that guy. You can't do that and be, prisoner to that. I took a lot of crap with that same thing in the draft with Lamar and Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. They were my top 2 guys. I was a huge Josh Allen fan. So it's not a perfect process. It's not. You got to kind of put things together and piece them together the way you're talking about it. And last thing is, like, I went Burrow and Murray won the last 2 drafts. That was chalk. I wasn't trying to, shake things up. And I loved your point about the talent level of BYU. Yeah, I mean, again, yes, I wish he would have played against better talent too. But to me, throwing into a tight window or throwing to a guy covered is the same no matter what. He's a high-level athlete. Ben Roethlisberger at Miami, Ohio, Josh Allen in Wyoming, Phil Simms, Moorhead State, all those guys, they're going to adjust to the receiver and the DB being a hair faster and still be able to put the ball where they need to. And he makes a lot of those plays like you talked about where there's nothing there and you go, whoa, like with Zach Wilson, you go, holy shit, what a throw there. Whoa, what great feet to move and throw that ball sidearm. And not a knock on Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones or anything like that. But to your point, once again, there's great freedom in knowing you're on the better team on the field every game. And there's great freedom in, I missed that 5-yard out. I should have hit it. He was wide open. But it doesn't matter because somebody will be wide open the next play, or we'll throw a screen, or I'll hand it off to Travis Etienne and he'll get 20 yards. And we forget about the missed throw and things like that. So you said a lot of good things that I really agree with. And sorry that I'm talking so much.
Do you think that helps also? Because, as somebody who played, right, like that influences a quarterback's career too. Like, when Patrick Mahomes got to Kansas City, that's a team that was a winner. And that's a team that, even though their defense was bad early on, to what you said, not every throw was life or death. Every single throw for Sam Darnold is life or death for the Jets.
Yes.
If they get behind 7-0, they're fucked. Like, they're screwed. Like, they have no, right? So there's so much more pressure there. Whereas what you're talking about with Lawrence, and you're talking about with Mac Jones, you're talking about, like, there's a freedom there in sort of being able to make mistakes, and mistakes are sort of the mistakes in any walk of life are the best because they allow you to accumulate data and they allow you to get better. And there are some players who, when you watch them play, you're like, gosh, this guy is just not letting it rip because he's in such a shitty circumstance that that it doesn't give rise to much in the way of like greatness.
Yeah.
No, it goes back to the old saying where I always say, George, I always go, with Sam Darnold, I say this all the time. I go, when you're surrounded by shit, you're going to get some shit on you and smell like shit. I don't know what you expect. I mean, and he had no support to be able to do that and everything to your, they dropped the ball. I'm still a believer in Sam Darnold. Right now I go, no, let's draft Zach Wilson and go. But I think Sam Darnold could still be a really good starting quarterback. You can win a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold. The Jets did him didn't do him justice by the lack of support. They never let him flourish or give him talent to really see what he has and what he's capable of being. That's why you'll always hear me go, like, I think Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. I don't know, and maybe Patrick Mahomes is going to challenge that here soon. But Rodgers, to your point, Eric, I feel like for the most part of his career has had to play that way. Like, I got to throw a bullseye. I gotta dance around in the pocket for 6 seconds because no one's open. I mean, he wasn't doing that because he was like, this is cool and I look cool on TV. He was part of a crappy offense that didn't have a ton of talent, and he was he's always, for the most part, unless they were just totally outclassed as a team, to even the scales because of some of those things you just talked about.
Well, it's interesting because I want to push back a little bit on some of the things you guys said.
Cool.
The first is you look at, so when I'm thinking about Zach Wilson versus Trevor Lawrence, I think you guys brought up some really interesting points about the competition, which I think is the thing that everyone's overlooking, right? The ACC was not very good. And there is that you go into it and you say, a lot of people want to like Trevor Lawrence. Like, you could go and do a podcast being like, I don't want to like the guy who's got his shirt buttoned up all the way. Or I don't want to like the guy who's got a headband that says any team, any place, anywhere, right? Who goes to a private school. Yeah. That. So a lot of people went into it thinking that way. But I will say this, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Trevor Lawrence has been ordained in a similar way that I want to say a LeBron was, where when LeBron was in high school, he had pressure on him every single time he stepped on the court, where he knew if he missed an open receiver or an open layup or dunk or three or whatever, everyone was going to talk about it. And I feel like Lawrence has had that pressure. Now, his numbers have not been as good as people want to think they have been, especially last year. And this year were a little less disappointing. But doesn't that count for something? The fact that he was the guy, and for every game that he stepped on the field was the guy, whereas Zach Wilson, no one even knew what he was doing. He was out there playing at recess.
Sure. No, George, I'm with you. I'm not going to argue that any of that, what you just said. First off, everybody just sees my rankings and they go, oh, this is an indictment on Trevor. It's not. Trevor Lawrence is awesome. I've said, if anybody listened to my podcast and how I break it down, I said he's worthy of the number one pick. He is definitely worthy. I expect him to be the number one pick. With Urban Meyer and the offense I expect him to run, he really fits that. So I got no issue with that. I'm just saying I like Zach Wilson a little bit more. But you're right. He's been asked to succeed and performed on the biggest stages in college football, and he handles himself really the right way no matter what. He never gets too high. He never gets too low. And that aspect, I love that demeanor about him and the fact of what he can translate to the NFL as being a franchise superstar quarterback.
I will say, though, when he proposed, he probably could have gotten a little lower. Knee did not quite touch grass.
Yeah, but wasn't he wearing like white pants? I feel like
he was not wearing white pants.
I feel like that would have been.
But I'm talking about the level of nitpicking with Lawrence. So let's dive in here. So you have Wilson and Lawrence. Now, you would take Wilson 1 if you were the Jags.
I mean, I would. I think Wilson, to me, is Mahomes or Rodgers, where I just go, man.
Who's Trevor Lawrence?
The consistency of throwing is there every time. The power in the arm is wowing at times, where I just go, whoa. You know, his feet and ability to move and make throws off of awkward platforms is as good as I've seen since Mahomes coming out in the draft. You know, so that I love that aspect about him. I think his game translates more to the NFL, and the fact that he's maybe in a little bit more of a pro offense, and the way he can dissect and go through reads, it's impressive. You know, Lawrence, it is a little more of a college-y offense, and he didn't have to go through those reads that way sometimes. It was a little like fake the screen and throw the go right up the sideline. And all, you know, were very impressive throws. There's no doubt about that. You know, but to your point too, George, like, you know, Clemson's really good. They started a freshman for a few games this year.
Oh, yeah.
Damn, they took the number 4 team in football. Clemson's going to be really good next year too. They are. So you know, again, don't put all this. We're in this era right now. We put all this success on the quarterback. If the team wins, we go quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. If they lose, we go quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. And then, you know, we turn around the next segment and go, this is the greatest team sport there is in America. And you go, well, that's not what we're talking about. I don't know. It's just crazy to me that way. But I love Trevor Lawrence. He's got size, George. Size is a skill. He can throw over the line of scrimmage. He can throw with people around him. Right? He's got that over Zach Wilson for sure.
Yep.
His arm is legit, and there's some untapped potential. He's got a few mechanical flaws. Like you were talking about, the stats and things like that are a little more underwhelming than people realize. That was the thing that jumped out to me when I started to break him down. I just went, ooh, he misses more throws than I realized watching on TV over the last few years. But not to the point where I'm like, oh, man, there's real trouble here. No, it's still a lot of big-time throws outside the number, down the field, back shoulder throws that I look at and I go, hey, this guy's got an incredibly high floor and an incredibly high ceiling, and certainly worthy of the number 1 pick.
Well, and we've seen guys who weren't making every throw in college, who guys like me and guys like George would ding for accuracy metrics and stuff, find a home like Buffalo where the team played into the strengths and allowed the quarterback to grow nonlinearly into the system. Right. Chris, like you played the game, and you got into different situations. You played for 3 teams, and I think you more than anybody on this show could talk about the situation where it's also the marriage of team and player, and we oftentimes evaluate people post hoc way more. Sometimes, you know,
it's a Darnold situation.
A team bus.
Chris is over here quoting my freshman philosophy book about, you know, shit getting on you.
A team busts more, I think, than the player busts. Let's say that. And so when you look at this draft and you look at maybe the way it's going to shake out, who's a player that might not succeed in an average circumstance but could succeed with a team that's picking, let's say, in the top 12, and who's a player who could have succeeded, let's say a la Darnold, could have succeeded in average circumstances, but might struggle with the team that drafts him?
Yeah. Okay. So, listen, you said a lot of good things there. The first thing I'll say is you're right. Like, there's plenty of situations where you look at where hey, the team dropped the ball. They didn't support this guy the right way. You look at Lamar Jackson and what they did for him right away, right? That got him going. You already brought up Mahomes, both of you. I mean, that's spot on. He took over a team that was the number 2 seed in the AFC playoffs. He got to be the quarterback for that team. So he was set up for success. Now, there's other guys where I can get into where, like, let's go back to the Blake Bortles days and all that. And I go, I don't give a fuck what system you put him in and what team you put him in. It ain't going to work. You know, one of the big things for playing quarterback is being able to throw the football. And when you can't throw the football, I don't give a shit what team you're on. So that's the one I look at, you know, as far as that. So you want a guy, say that again to me because I'm not that smart and I couldn't follow it all. So you want to go ahead one more time.
Yeah, who's a guy who, if given the right system, He might not look great on the average.
Right. Like,
But-
like take Jared Goff. Jared Goff looked like dog shit in the first year he played for LA.
Yeah.
But you gave him Sean McVay, and he
Sure.
was legit good for a couple years, earned
And
a
I'm asking
contract.
this question thinking about the Niners at 12.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But is there a quarterback who sticks out to you as somebody who you might not want to draft, but you're thinking to yourself, look, quarterbacks who are taken in the first round are such an economic benefit that I could build a system where this guy gets me Kirk Cousins level of production at a third of the price.
Right. All right. So, I mean, listen, you've heard my top 6, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, again, so everybody, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, Kellen Mond. Then I went Justin Fields and Trey Lance, right? I'm not gonna use any of those guys right there. The guy that would fit that mold to me just a little bit to where you go, I don't think he's got the high-end talent as any of those guys or anything like that, and he'll never get it. There's no way. But the kid from Stanford could be that at one point, right? He could be your Kirk Cousins, where, yeah, he's a mid-round draft pick, but if you put him on the right team, he knows how to play the position. He's got a pretty good, it's a solid arm. It's not great. He's a solid athlete, but he could be a guy. You put him on a team with a system and some talent around him, and we could all be sitting here maybe 4 or 5 years from now going, damn, he was better than we expected, or some of that.
Yeah.
So that's
Davis
He's also
Mills.
that guy, if you put him in a crappy situation, I go, no, I promise you he's going to look like crap. He doesn't have the talent to overcome some of the obstacles. And to me, that's where Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are the slam dunks number one.
Here's
and two.
a question.
Davis
They can do
Mills,
that.
real quick, Davis Mills, who he's talking about, was a 5-star recruit out of Atlanta and went to Stanford. And, injury shortened career, so you haven't seen a lot, but was an Elite 11 guy, made it to the finals there.
Similar projection in our system to Kellen Mond, which Kellen Mond is a good prospect. That's an interesting question because I know the CBA in 2011 really screwed over developmental quarterbacks. Right, there's no third quarterback dezigration anymore.
Right,
the Packers were so off the wall when they took Jordan Love and not only sat him behind Rodgers but behind Tim Boyle, their second guy.
Yeah.
I wonder, with the money the way it is currently with the salary cap, do teams is the Matt Castle era type backup quarterback over because those guys cost $5-6 million. In the case of Daniel, it's like double-digit millions.
Yeah.
Do we maybe see guys like teams just saying, look, go with Tom Moore's quote about Peyton Manning. If our quarterback gets hurt, we're fucked anyway. We might as well have Davis Mills be our 2.
We don't practice fucked.
And draft a number of these guys in the back half of the draft.
Yeah.
And just roll with them, and that would give some of these guys an opportunity because the era of quarterbacks like Jake Delhomme, Kurt Warner, guys that were good enough to get their teams to Super Bowl, we're not seeing that as frequently anymore because teams have not felt the economic incentive to take chances on these guys, and I think we're missing out on a few diamonds. Tony Romo would not have had the same opportunity that he had back when he played for Parcells. He would not.
Where would you take Davis Mills, Chris?
I think somewhere in the mid. I think 3rd, 4th round, you get into that conversation. I think that's realistically, and again, I haven't cracked through all the other positions in the draft yet to get a feel for that type of thing. But I think that's where it would be. To me, he is that next guy up after the big 6. But I don't expect it to be an end of the 2nd round or anything like that, unless there's a team that loves him. But I look at it as 3rd, 4th, somewhere in that range right there. And you can, let him develop just a little. But okay, he's a backup, great, and we know we can depend on when we need him. And let's see if we can maybe just improve him a little to where one day maybe if he is a starter, he can become something. And Eric, I think you're spot on with everything you said there. And you kind of laid out all the circumstances the right way. To me, the only teams or the teams that need really, really good backups, right, to where I would pay a little bit of money, is a team that you're a Super Bowl team, right? Like the Saints the last few years. We're a Super Bowl team. We're not going to just risk it on if Drew Brees goes down, it's oh, fuck you, the season's over, see you next year. Yep. You don't make that mistake. The 49ers made that mistake, in my opinion, this year. That was a mistake. Jimmy Garoppolo's injury prone. they rolled with two guys where I'd go, well, damn, I don't know what you expected. I don't.
Yeah.
But I think that's very real. And, that's why if the 49ers keep Jimmy Garoppolo, that'd be a team where I'd go, or let's say even the Tennessee Titans, another team where I'd go, sign up Mitchell Trubisky. Get a guy that's back there to where, okay, we got a guy, he can play 4 or 5 games. We're not saying we're going to win them all, but we can win more than we lose, and at least weather the storm until our starter gets back.
Yeah, there's just a knockoff effect for, I remember there was one season where Case Keenum got cut by St. Louis, spent the season with the Chargers, and then was signed back by St. Louis in December and starting 2 games that were the difference between the Texans making the playoffs or not. And John Skelton did almost the exact opposite thing. He was signed by the Rams and then cut by and he's starting a playoff game, and it's that can't be good for quarterbacks to constantly be shuffling systems. To me, it's a no-brainer that the 5th cornerback that is playing vice on punt team is nowhere near as valuable as cultivating the next like I said, Jake Delhomme, or even you guys, you played for Gruden when he would carry 4 or 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah,
I still think that's extremely smart, because eventually you're going to get one of those guys to pop up and be a competent, Matt Moore's win against the Minnesota Vikings last season got the Chiefs the 2 seed and a bye back when that got a bye, and was instrumental in their Super Bowl. To your point, those players matter, but the issue is there's just teams are just not cultivating these players at all.
Your ability to bring it back to the Chiefs,
I know,
is honestly, Chris, since Eric and I have started doing this podcast, Eric will bring the Chiefs into it. We could be talking about anything, riding a bike by the beach, and the Chiefs would come up somehow, some way. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to give you what I think, based on your rankings, your tiers might be, and correct me, adjust as we go here. So I'm guessing your tier 1 is Wilson and Lawrence.
Right. Agreed.
Okay, and then this is where I get a little fuzzy. So I'm going to say that tier 2 is Mac Jones alone. Yes or no?
I'm gonna say no and say no. I'm putting Kellen Mond in tier 2.
Okay.
Kellen Mond, and just to hit on it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why there's not more talk about the guy. I don't. And I think Eric hit it a little bit before. It's to me, he's he could be the Dak Prescott that everybody misses out on. First, there's talent there. There is an arm and a release that is special. And accuracy, and needs very little space in the pocket to make big throws. And to what Eric was saying before, they weren't always the most talented team on the field. Nor do I look at Jimbo Fisher's offense and just go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's as creative as, Alabama or Clemson that way either. So I'm going to put him in tier 2 with Mac Jones. My only negative with Kellen Mond is I wish he just wouldn't stand in the pocket at times and be, so robotic that way. He's such a good athlete. I want to be dude, get out of the pocket, make a move, do something. He's trying to be Johnny quarterback and going 1 to 2 to 3. And I'm okay, 1 to 2 to 3, and you're too fucking fast. Take off and do something, throw the ball on the run or whatever. That was my only negative, but sorry to interrupt. That would be they're my tier 2.
There's a marker here that's similar to the Mahomes. Mond's completion percentage up monotonically year to year. 51.5 as a freshman, played a lot as a freshman. Over 12 percentage points from one. You look at Mahomes' data, it's very similar to that. When you're looking at a player that over the course of his career got better and better and better, which I'm interested, I haven't done the study, but I'm interested to see what that ends up meaning. That's very interesting to your point. I wonder if there was some coaching there that basically said, hey, if you want to look like an NFL quarterback this season, do this. But to your point, the NFL is so much more of a mobile quarterback league that maybe that was just bad advice.
Yeah, it was interesting. I looked at,
and that's an easy fix to me. I know we're going to talk about Fields and Lance here in a second, and I'm going to tell you some of their issues where I go, if that's Mond's only issue, we can work on that. And really, even though it's a little robotic, the mechanics of him throwing are really spot on. And to another thing you said, Eric, there, just when I watch it, the accuracy and placement of the ball, he almost always throws it exactly where he wants to. it almost goes into the Justin Herbert thing too, where I go into like incompletions and I go, that was a good spot. He put the ball in the right spot. He didn't want to throw an interception. He didn't want to, take his team out of the game and put them in a bad spot. Like, that was a good decision. That was one of the ones I was like blown away by. I did not expect to love Kellen Mond like that. Like I said, I don't go into this with preconceived notions.
His sack rate taken every single year is also, he only took 8 sacks last year.
Yeah,
I think that's a very good.
Dramatically. And that's an important thing, because oftentimes we look at, so I'm looking at like where, his turnover worthy play rate was really low. So despite the fact that he wasn't, so when you're not taking sacks, you're throwing the ball more, so that's where you can get into a lot of trouble.
Right.
It was interesting. I looked at, accuracy, regardless of whether the ball was caught or not, on basically like 5+ yard throws downfield when a receiver had either a step of separation or less. So no wide open throws. Yeah. And what was interesting is that you look at a lot of these guys, like for Mac Jones, that like takes out, so many of his throws were wide open.
Yeah.
And for Kellen Mond, it almost doesn't change at all, because almost all of his throws were of that sort, where he was throwing to a guy that didn't have a lot of separation. I thought that was really interesting. And his numbers year to year are not all that dissimilar from Trevor Lawrence, accuracy-wise, which really shocked me. It shocked me more from the Trevor Lawrence angle until I saw you talking about Mond, honestly. But then when I went back and looked, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So that means there's a bit of a separation there between Mond and Fields and Lance, who I'm assuming are tier 3. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because we last year were making a case that, hey, Fields should be in the conversation, if not ahead of Trevor Lawrence, and people were very angry about that. So what is it with Lance and Fields where you go, I'm just not seeing it from them compared to Mond and Jones?
Right. Well, I think there's things they need to work on for me to feel comfortable about them all the way. There's some high-end elite traits that you look at and I go, man, I love it. I love it. So I don't again, I think Fields is a first-round pick still. Now, I think it's later on in the first round. I think Lance is probably a guy I look at to be in the second round. Really, my biggest things, and I'll just hit on Lance because I think there's probably less to talk about. I'll just hit on that first. Lance, his arm is really powerful. The ball explodes out of his hands. He has, one little mechanical issue that I don't love, but as a whole, his mechanics and his placement of the ball I found to be more consistent than Justin Fields. But the big thing that scares me with Lance is this. One game this past year, the year before that, like you already talked about, they're clearly the better team on the field all the time, and they didn't really even ever put the game in his hands that way. Right. They were a run-first football team. Mm-hmm. And when he did drop back to throw, a lot of it was like, hey, play action, and we designed you to throw it to this guy right here. And he could throw some really impressive throws. But there's less NFL type of throws and things that it just, to me, there needs to be growth there, let alone there's some games in 2019 where, he only throws the ball like 12 times. And 15 times. So lack of reps would scare the shit out of me with Trey Lance as far as like, oh, we're going to make him a first-round pick and make him a starter right now this year for our team. I couldn't do that.
Well, it's also one of the reasons like we always shied away from betting on Lamar Jackson in playoff games was because we just don't have enough data in him playing from behind. Like you just like you don't have like every single time where you play from ahead, there's the threat of play action. There's the credible threat of a run. There's and one thing I noticed about Lance in 2019, which I wrote about on PFF.com, he had more yards passing on balls that traveled over 20 yards in the air than he did on balls traveling between 10 and 19, which means, again, you're looking at 10 and 19. That's like a double. You got to be able to hit doubles in Major League Baseball to hit home runs.
Every great quarterback kills.
And football, in football, the guys that kill 10 to 19 consistently, they're the great quarterbacks. And 20 yards plus, a lot of that stuff is you're playing FCS teams. And I don't know if you've watched any of the FCS. If you're not watching it in the fall, you're not watching FCS in the spring. But the coverage for FCS players, those guys backpedal worse than you, George.
Well, but I'm an athlete.
And so you're getting wide open throws. You're not putting it in the sort of windows necessarily.
Exactly.
And like you said, NDSU plays 17-3 3 games. Like, and I just don't know if I really want to buy into a quarterback who's only been able to win a game that would like, it honestly resembled like your dad felt like their game, the Giants back in the 80s, like where you're playing defense and running the ball and the quarterback's taking deep shots. Like that's not necessarily how football's played anymore.
Right. That's a good point.
No, agreed. And you're right, though. I mean, with what you said there, Lance, a lot of those throws, too, their game plan, like, hey, we know if we get them in this defense and run this fake, we're only going to send 2 guys out here. And, yeah, he can throw a pretty ball, and it can be really impressive. But I need the meat and the potatoes and that stuff, like you're talking about. I mean, you're only going to get a throw or 2 like that, every other week or once a game or something like that. So you can't put all your eggs into, like, well, he throws that deep post route really awesome. Okay, well, I got to see everything else. That's where again, I like the talent. The athlete's phenomenal. It's a strong arm, but there's not a lot of true quarterback play, and reps and all that scare me. Now, do you want me to go to Justin Fields now, or do you want to ask?
I am
more?
dying to know your Justin, because I feel as though Justin Fields is getting a lot of scrutiny that, for example, Trevor Lawrence, and you're giving Trevor Lawrence a fair amount of scrutiny, but I see a decent amount of scrutiny for Justin Fields that I don't think is being levied on Trevor Lawrence, and that everyone wants to bring up how OSU's offense is gimmicky as hell. And as you talked about, go watch Clemson play. Please tell me how gimmicky that offense is. And Justin Fields has been very accurate with the ball. He's a phenomenal athlete in a league where coaches are getting better and better at leveraging athleticism at the quarterback position. So that's where I'm coming at it from. Give me your piece.
Yeah, and I hear you. Listen, I don't feel good talking like there's a lot to like about Justin Fields. This is just, we're talking business, we're talking ball. I'm trying to give you, my positive and negatives. Nothing personal. I'm rooting for him. I hope Justin Fields ends up being awesome and shits all over me. I really do. I hope he does. I'm not rooting against
you don't
that.
have a personal vendetta against Justin Fields?
No, I know. Well,
thank you for clearing that up. I just assumed.
Guys, I wish I was faster at this, but I just pulled this up. Trey Lance had 22 dropbacks in a game where his team trailed in his college career.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. That alone is scary.
Yeah.
So thank
anyway,
you.
sorry.
But so like the Justin Fields, let's go with the positives.
Yep.
First off, he's built like a Greek god. He's built like Cam Newton, except he's a little shorter. His running is real. Now, for some of the deficiencies I'm going to hit on in the passing game and all that, you will be able to rely on like a legit quarterback run game, I think, early on in his career. Whether that's scrambling or design quarterback runs or anything like that, he's going to be able to do that, which, of course, is going to take a little pressure off of him and maybe some of the things in the pass game. His arm is, through the roof strong. He's got an unbelievable arm, but it is a long release and it needs room. And yes, there's games where he can piece it all together and he can throw rifle after rifle and hit the bullseye. But then I can get into other games where I go, whoa, the ball's everywhere and he can't hit the broad side of the barn. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what concerns me. Now, like you talked about, the offense and all of that. Yeah, it's a lot of just, one read type of offense. Is that guy open? Oh, he's not. Let me run. And you don't see a lot of progression as far as in the passing game. It's less than Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, from what I've studied and everything like that. So there's less of that. He can be a little bit, when everything's covered, you just go, whoa, don't do that with the ball, or don't make that throw. That's a little scary. But there was too many what I would call slam dunk NFL completions where I just went, holy cow, that guy didn't even have a chance to get a hand on the football. He's the worst short ball thrower, I think, out of any of the guys we've talked about. Wow. Shallow crosses, balls to the back, things like that. It's 50-50 with some of those type of throws. So there's a lot of good, don't get me wrong. I mean, I see games where I go, wow, he was really had at that game. But he has a very floppy arm. Mm-hmm. So that bothers me. It's like Dwayne Haskins, to where it's hard to piece that together every time when you're that floppy. If you really watch some of the games where things got out of hand too, he lets his feet get real close together. And then he pushes off like he's a pitcher on a pitching mound. And to me, it's like the guy with the driver in his hand at the golf range, right? You go, whoa, does he swing that thing back wild and aggressive? Whoa, it went 350 down the middle. But then you get to the next hole and you go, whoa, that was 350 and it's 4 fairways over now. And what do we do now? And to me, there's just not enough consistency with that decision making. And to me, those are things that need to be worked on before I can say, you're in my top 4 or my top 1 or 2 tiers, as you explained, George.
Well, and that's why I think he's my answer to which player, if paired with the right team, could have success, because he reminds me a little bit what you're talking about with when the league was different, in the 90s, 80s, and even guys with longer releases like Randall Cunningham and guys like that could have more success because it was about throwing the ball downfield and less about timing. And one guy that came up, drafted by Jacksonville, played at Tampa, played at Pittsburgh, Byron Leftwich was really like the catalyst for all of us sort of taking a step back and being like, wait a sec, if the league is transitioning towards a rhythm passing game and you have such a methodical release, you're just always going to be a step behind defenses who are increasingly faster, increasingly smaller. Right. And so when I think about Fields, I think about like a San Francisco type offense where you're running play actions and the stuff is sort of open for you, right? And obviously Shanahan has had success with guys who could run, RG3, and he hasn't had that recently in Ryan or in Garoppolo. But to me, I think that would be a situation where he would have an immense amount of success early and provide a lot of value, even if, to your point, he has to grow into that quarterback where you give him a second contract no matter what. I think he's sort of in that range of can have a ton of success in a good system, but would not be able to carry a team on his back like Andrew Luck did early on.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I think that's spot on. And, your thoughts about the 49ers and all that are with you. The team I always go to with Justin Fields, is I always look at like Pittsburgh drafting at 24. That to me would be, and again, I'm hoping Pittsburgh's not going to drop back and throw the ball 50 times a game, 5 yards short this year. That they're going to realize, like, hey, look at what Tampa Bay did with Brady. Let's run the ball, let's protect, and then Big Ben will hit Chase Claypool or Deontay Johnson when they win one-on-one matchups. But that to me would be the type of scenario I would love to see Justin Fields in. Yeah, get there. Continue to work on some of the technique flaws, learn the game, learn how to go to progressions. Ohio State, to me, George, it's even more raw than Clemson. There's too many plays where I go, it's a lot of 3-man routes, and we're going to keep 6 guys in to protect, and he's not really even having to worry about who makes him hot or who's not. And then there's the times where, Eric, you brought it up. It was scary to me, too, where I went, whoa, he doesn't even know this guy's free on the blitz. He has no idea that this guy is going to make him, he should throw it hot or get it out of his. And a lot of the times, because he's such a freak of nature, he can break the tackle and maybe still make a play and do things like that. But just a few too many plays of that to where, again, I don't think if I was a GM, could draft him in the top 10 or 15 because there is some flaws to work on and, some flaws that I think are just not fixed overnight. It's going to take a little time and detail to get them right.
Yeah, and there's also one thing that's sneaky that people I don't think account for, and it's because it's relatively new. The athletic
grit,
the athletic mismatch that Ohio State has in the skill position players over every other Big Ten team is immense. And we saw in the conference title game when he did not have the weapons that he was used to. Issues. I mean, he had 4 yards per attempt for Northwestern's defense is amazing. I'm not taking anything away from them, but once you had a well-schemed, the Bears wanted Fitzgerald as their head coach after that game because you have a well-schemed defense and you perturb his system just a little bit. Olave is a top 10 player next year's draft. And you take away those type of skill position players, and it's just a little rougher for him. Again, I don't think that disqualifies him from anything, but it does make you pause a little bit and look at, this production might not necessarily be exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
No, I agree. The Northwestern game, the Alabama game, and the national championship game. that would scare me. And I'm not a guy that's all about stats and wins or losses or things like that. But the decisions weren't necessarily good. The quality of the throws weren't good. I don't care about incompletions like we just talked about. Mm-hmm. But there was too many throws in the Northwestern game, the Alabama game, where you just go, whoa, like that. He didn't even give the guy a chance. There might have been if he hit the outside corner here on the plate, he might have get a completion. But it was like, whoa, ball way outside. It was kind of that. And even in the Clemson game, again, the Clemson game was really good. There's some eye-popping throws. There's also some throws where I go, oh, he hits a go route down the left sideline. I go, that should have been a walk-in touchdown. But the receiver has to fall to the ground to catch it because it's really not that great thrown. Or some other throws throughout the game where I went, man, I mean, if he just hits that 10-yard in cut or that 5-yard shallow cross, there's nobody going to tackle the guy. He's going to score a touchdown. And then there's even a touchdown pass or two, like he had a one to the tight end who ran a curl route to the left side, where, again, that was a great throw. He throws a missile, but it was, to me, a poor decision. So, it's about taking all of that into account. And, again, I like Justin Fields. There's a lot of high-end stuff to like. I just think there's some things to work on, and that's why I don't view him as one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the draft.
Personal vendetta for Chris Sims against Justin Fields. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he likes to unbutton the shirt. He likes to let it fly a little bit.
Look at you.
I was really hoping that you were going to wear – so I wore a button-up shirt. My plan was to slowly unbutton as we went through. I could see that.
I mean, you are here.
As we went through the podcast. You didn't oblige, so we'll have to do this again. I want to get you out of here on this, though. University of Texas.
Yep.
They've had some troubles finding a consistent leader at the head coaching position. Have they ever reached out to you, former quarterback of the University of Texas, about being the leader over there at UT?
No. Well, I mean, I wish they would just call me to ask me advice sometimes.
Yeah.
That's where I just want to go. Texas has got too many cooks in the kitchen. That's the problem with Texas. There's too many know-it-all billionaires who are trying to tell everybody what to do with that school. And that's the issue with Texas. There's no doubt about it. As you know, we're living in a world. The billionaires know everything, right? They know.
Oh, yes.
They know the climate, the economy, they know viruses, they know everything. Because they got a lot of money. They know football, who should be the quarterback. And to me, that's one of the issues down there in Texas. It's a big issue. And no, I don't even get a call. I want to be like, oh, yeah, don't listen to me, the guy that's, been around NFL football his whole life and has all these friends in the NFL that I'm connected with. And there's none of that. But we'll see.
Maybe,
I don't know what. It's
maybe
embarrassing
we'll get it started
right now. It's Texas. We're embarrassing. That's all I could say.
Maybe we're going to start the Chris Sims to UT. You and McConaughey can team up and bring Texas back. I also, in doing some research, I found a really funny picture of you and McConaughey. You look like you're 12 years old, and McConaughey is giving you a handshake. And the thing below it is like McConaughey supposedly slipping $100 bills to UT players. And I was gonna say, if you or any of the other players had kept the $100 bill and said this was a McConaughey $100 bill, you could probably sell it as an NFT for $3 million now.
Well,
seriously, he's awesome. He was such a great guy to have around the program. Some of my best memories at Texas were Thursday practices, right? You play on a Saturday. Thursday practice was a little easier and relaxed. He would come out, and while the team would be doing special teams, that's how we started that Thursday practice for like the first 20 or 30 minutes. He would run around like a little kid and be like, throw it, and I'd be throwing the ball to Matthew McConaughey. It was unbelievable. And then we'd get going to practice, George, and we start practicing, and he'd take his shirt off, and, he's got some pecs and some abs, and he would jog around the field and then get to one corner and do like 20 push-ups, and then jog to the other corner and do like 50 sit-ups. He's such a cool guy. He's one of my
that
idols.
just sounds like a guy with a lot of time on his hands. Speaking of somebody with a lot of time on his hands, you played with one of our colleagues.
Oh, yes.
And in fact, the conditions in which Bruce got to play were probably, you played with a lacerated spleen for a few snaps, which has to be one of the toughest things.
A lot of snaps.
Yeah. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's like stubbed my toe, and I still managed to get to work that day.
So, Bruce, what was it like to play with Bruce? Because
what's your best Bruce Gradkowski story?
What's your best Bruce story?
Oh gosh, Bruce is awesome. First off, he really is. He was always a great friend, supportive. He still is a great friend. I mean, he really family couldn't be nicer. Bruce he's awesome, and I was dying on the field, and he got to take my job. Definitely, there's no doubt. My best, well, you know what Bruce did? Here's a good one, because I'm probably gonna forget it, but here's the best thing. Bruce gets to Tampa, and he hasn't done jack diddly shit yet, right? And there's the rules in the NFL, you're not going to do commercials or do things like that until you've established yourself a little, right? So I'm telling you, we're out of OTAs. He's like the third string quarterback at the time. And I'm sitting there one day on a Saturday afternoon, watching, and the local car dealership comes on, and it's Bruce selling cars like this. And I'm just going, look at this fucking guy. He's hilarious. But that's probably my best Bruce story right there.
Bruce, I will say, Bruce is the biggest hustler at PFF. I will, the fact, we'll just be talking about stuff, and Gradkowski will be like, yeah, this hospice I own. I'm like, you own a hospice?
Yeah. And a restaurant?
He owns, he just has, the guy.
And he's good at social media.
Dude, the guy, he gets it.
And he's good at basketball. I love Bruce.
Yeah, he showed up and played basketball with us in jeans and was the best player. Still a good athlete.
My favorite Bruce story,
great athlete,
Chris, is that when we were in Miami for the Super Bowl, he had a friend who was really good friends with the Niners ownership and the Yorks and everything. So he goes, I'm going to dinner with them. And he comes out of the room. We had this Airbnb. He comes out of the room with literally dressed in a Niners uniform, red pants, black shirt, black blazer, black shoes.
And a little gold, and his socks.
Johnny South Beach over there. Yeah, I got you.
It was absolutely incredible.
I can see that all the way from Bruce, no doubt.
Oh man, we'll do this again, and you'll wear your burnt orange button up all the way as we get Chris Sims, UT head coach. I'm sure NBC will be really mad at me for starting that rumor, but we got to bring him back somehow, some way. Chris Sims, you can check him out on PFT Live and the Unbuttoned podcast. This was a lot of fun, man. We got to do it again soon. Be well, brother.
No, thanks for having me. It really was. It was a great conversation. It really was. I enjoyed it. And, good luck. And anytime you want to do it, you let me know. You get closer to the draft, after the draft, I'd love to come back on.
It'd be fun. Special thanks to Chris Sims. I was a little bummed, that he didn't have, buttons on the shirt. But win some, you lose some.
He was remarkably, open to, discussion. I feel like a lot of people are kind of hey, I'm different. My thoughts are different. Screw everybody else. But I thought he was very measured in what he said, which is, I think, an indictment maybe on the way in which we consume media when he posts his rankings and everybody's like, oh, he's just doing it for this, that, and the other thing. When in reality, and he talked about how he doesn't really watch college football. So he comes into it maybe knowing less or having weaker priors than we all have. But I thought he defended his views really well.
Yeah, it was eye-opening, insightful, and shockingly, things on Twitter do not give an accurate representation.
You wonder
of how having conversations with people in real life versus looking at how people attack, for lack of a better word, their opinions and measured views on the platform is hilarious. But that was awesome. We'll be back on Sunday. We're going to continue guessing win totals. We're going to talk a little free agency. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out. Love you guys.